The studio lights blazed down on the set of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, their warm glow casting a sheen over the polished stage. The audience buzzed with anticipation, their chatter a low hum punctuated by bursts of laughter as they awaited the next guest. The set was a familiar spectacle. Sleek navy curtains framed the stage, a mahogany desk gleamed under the spotlights, and the iconic New York City skyline backdrop twinkled with artificial stars. Tonight's episode promised to be a big one. Pedro Pascal, the charismatic star of the Fantastic Four: First Steps, was here to promote his latest blockbuster, fresh off its July 2025 release. But what happened next would shock everyone in the room and ignite a firestorm online, cementing this moment in television history. The band struck up a lively tune, and Stephen Colbert bounded onto the stage, his signature grin flashing as he waved to the crowd. The audience erupted in applause, some holding up signs proclaiming, "We love Stephen!" and "Pedro Pascal forever!" Colbert adjusted his glasses, leaned into the microphone, and delivered his opening quip. "Folks, tonight we've got a real treat. Pedro Pascal, the man who's saving the Marvel Universe one charming smile at a time. But don't worry, I've got some questions that might wipe that smile right off." The audience laughed, but there was an edge to Colbert's tone, a glint in his eye that hinted at something sharper beneath the humor. Behind the scenes, producers exchanged glances, their headsets crackling with nervous chatter. They knew Colbert's penchant for pushing boundaries, and tonight, with a star like Pascal, the stakes felt higher. Pedro Pascal strode out to thunderous applause, his easy confidence filling the room. Dressed in a tailored charcoal suit with an open-collared shirt, he flashed a warm smile and waved to the crowd, his dark eyes crinkling with genuine warmth. He settled into the guest chair, crossing one leg over the other, his posture relaxed but alert. The audience was smitten. Some fans whispered to each other, phones already out to capture every moment. Colbert leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk, and the interview began with the usual pleasantries. "Pedro, welcome back to the show. The Fantastic Four: First Steps is breaking box office records. Congratulations. How's it feel to be Reed Richards, the brainiest guy in the Marvel Universe?" Pascal chuckled, running a hand through his tousled hair. "It's wild, Stephen. I mean, Reed's this genius with a heart, and I'm just trying to keep up with the spandex and the science jargon. But it's been a blast, working with Vanessa Kirby, Joseph Quinn, Eben Moss-Backrack. We're like a family now." His voice was warm, his enthusiasm infectious, and the audience clapped approvingly. For a moment, the atmosphere was light, the chemistry between host and guest effortless. But no one in that studio was prepared for what was coming. Colbert's smile tightened, his eyes narrowing slightly as he leaned back in his chair. "A family, huh? That's sweet. You've been getting pretty cozy with your co-stars, haven't you? I mean, the internet's been buzzing about you, Pedro. All that touchy-feely stuff." The audience let out a collective gasp, a ripple of unease passing through the room. The band faltered for a split second, and the second camera operator swung his lens toward Pascal, catching the faint twitch of his jaw. The other guests on the panel, a comedian and a political analyst, shifted uncomfortably in their seats, exchanging glances. Sonny Hostin, a guest host filling in for the evening, forced a nervous laugh, trying to defuse the tension. "Oh, Stephen, always stirring the pot," she said, but her voice was strained. Pascal's smile didn't waver, but his eyes darkened, a flicker of wariness crossing his face. "I'm not sure what you mean, Stephen," he said, his tone light but measured. "I'm a hugger, you know. I love connecting with people, it's how I stay grounded." The audience murmured, some nodding in support, others whispering to their neighbors. A woman in the front row clutched her phone, already recording, sensing the shift in the air. Behind the scenes, a producer hissed into her headset, "What's he doing? We didn't clear this." The floor manager gestured frantically to Colbert, but the host pressed on, undeterred. "Oh, come on, Pedro," Colbert said, his voice dripping with mock innocence. "You're all over the tabloids. That clip from Willem Dafoe's Hollywood Walk of Fame ceremony last year? You know, where you were, let's say, very friendly with his wife, Giada Colagrande, right in front of him? People are calling it creepy. What's the deal there? The studio fell silent, the air thick with tension. A few audience members gasped audibly, and one man muttered, "Oh no, he didn't." The cameras zoomed in, capturing Pascal's reaction, a slow blink, a tightening of his lips. Sunny Hostin's eyes widened, and she opened her mouth to interject, but Colbert barreled forward. "I mean, you're out there stroking her chin, and Willem's just standing there, looking like he's ready to throw hands. What's the story, man?" The accusation hung in the air like a guillotine. Pascal's fingers twitched on the armrest, his knuckles whitening for a moment before he forced them to relax. He leaned forward slightly, his voice steady but laced with an edge. "Stephen, that was a moment between friends. Willem and Giada are family to me, we've known each other for years. You're cherry-picking a clip to make it something it's not." His words were calm, but the strain in his voice was unmistakable, a tremor of frustration beneath the surface. The audience was divided. Some clapped in support, others whispered skeptically, their phones still raised. A stagehand fumbled with a cue card, dropping it with a soft thud that echoed in the tense silence. Colbert raised an eyebrow, undeterred, his grin taking on a sharper edge. "Friends, sure. But you've got a pattern, Pedro. Vanessa Kirby, Sarah Paulson, now Giada. People are saying you're using this anxiety excuse to get a little too handsy. I mean, you told Men's Health you reach out when you're anxious. Is that code for something else?" The audience erupted in a mix of gasps and nervous laughter, the sound jarring against the clatter of a coffee mug tipping over on the desk. Sunny Hostin jumped in, her voice urgent. "Okay, let's not twist his words. Pedro's been open about his anxiety, and that's a real thing. Let's talk about the movie, yeah?" But her attempt to redirect fell flat. Colbert's eyes were locked on Pascal, and the star's composure was starting to crack. Pascal's smile vanished, replaced by a steely gaze. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, his body language shifting from open to guarded. "You're trying to make a story where there isn't one, Stephen," he said, his voice low but firm. "I've been honest about my anxiety because I think it helps people feel less alone. But you're taking something personal, something human, and turning it into a cheap shot for laughs. That's not journalism, it's just mean." The audience erupted again, some cheering for Pascal's candor, others booing Colbert's tactics. A producer in the control booth threw her hands up, muttering, "We're going viral for all the wrong reasons." The cameras swiveled, capturing every angle of the escalating drama, the operators' hands trembling slightly as they adjusted their shots. The tension in the studio was palpable, the air thick with anticipation. Colbert leaned forward, his fingers drumming on the desk, clearly relishing the moment. "Mean? Come on, Pedro, it's just a question. People want to know, where's the line? You're out there touching everyone, and some folks aren't buying the anxiety angle. Like, what's next, you gonna stroke my chin?" He chuckled, but the joke landed like a lead balloon. The audience's laughter was sparse, drowned out by murmurs of discomfort. Sunny Hostin buried her face in her hands, and the comedian on the panel let out a nervous giggle, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. Behind the scenes, the floor manager signaled for a commercial break, but Colbert waved it off, determined to keep the pressure on. Pascal's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing as he studied Colbert. For a moment, it seemed like he might laugh it off, defuse the situation with his trademark charm. But something in his expression shifted, a spark of indignation, a flicker of resolve. He uncrossed his arms and leaned forward, his voice steady but laced with quiet intensity. "You know, Stephen, I came here to talk about a movie I'm proud of, about a team that poured their hearts into it. But instead, you're digging up a year-old clip and twisting it to fit some narrative that gets you clicks. You want to talk about lines? Let's talk about yours." The audience gasped, a few clapping wildly, sensing the tide turning. The cameras zoomed in, catching the faint flush creeping up Colbert's neck, the first crack in his polished facade. What happened next would leave the studio in stunned silence and spark a firestorm across social media. But that's a story for the next chapter. The studio lights seemed to burn hotter now, their glare reflecting off the polished surface of Stephen Colbert's desk as the tension in the Late Show's studio reached a boiling point. The audience sat on edge, their earlier excitement replaced by a mix of shock and anticipation. Phones were raised high, capturing every second of the unfolding drama, while the hum of the cameras filled the air like a swarm of restless bees. Pedro Pascal's words, "Let's talk about your lines," hung in the air, a gauntlet thrown down in front of a stunned Stephen Colbert. The host's grin faltered, his fingers freezing mid-drum on the desk. For a moment, the studio was so quiet that the faint click of a stagehand's pen dropping echoed like a gunshot. Colbert recovered quickly, leaning back with a forced chuckle, his eyes glinting with a mix of amusement and defiance. "Oh, Pedro, you're turning the tables now? I love it! But come on, man, you're dodging the question. People see you getting all touchy with Giada Colagrande right in front of Willem Dafoe, and they're wondering, where's the respect? You can't just say anxiety and expect everyone to buy it." His tone was playful, but the barb was sharp, slicing through the pretense of friendly banter. The audience reacted with a mix of gasps and murmurs, some nodding in agreement with Colbert, others shaking their heads in support of Pascal. A woman in the second row whispered to her friend, "He's going too far." Her phone still recording, the red light blinking steadily. Sunny Hostin, the guest host, shifted in her seat, her hands gripping the edge of the desk as if to anchor herself. "Stephen, maybe we should move on," she interjected, her voice tight with unease. "Pedro's here to talk about the Fantastic Four, and I think we're getting a little sidetracked." Her attempt to steer the conversation was desperate, her eyes darting between Pascal and Colbert, but the host waved her off with a dismissive hand. "Oh, Sonny, we're just having a real conversation here." "Right, Pedro? You're not afraid of a little honesty, are you?" The cameras swiveled to Pascal, catching the way his shoulders tensed, his fingers curling into fists for a fleeting moment before he forced them to relax. Pascal's face was a study in control, but his eyes burned with a quiet intensity. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his gaze locked on Colbert. "Honesty? Sure, let's talk about honesty," he said, his voice low and deliberate, each word measured but heavy with intent. "You're taking a moment from a year ago, a moment between friends, a moment you weren't even there for, and you're spinning it into something ugly. You're not asking for honesty, Stephen. You're fishing for drama because it gets you views. That's not respect. That's not journalism. That's just cheap." The audience erupted, a wave of applause mixed with boos, the room splitting into factions. A man in the back shouted, "Tell him, Pedro," while another hissed, "Answer the question." The division was palpable, the air electric with conflicting emotions. Colbert's grin tightened, a flush creeping up his neck as he adjusted his glasses. He wasn't used to being called out so directly, and the shift in power was evident in the way his fingers twitched on the desk. "Cheap? Wow, that's a strong word, Pedro," he said, his voice laced with sarcasm. "But let's be real, you're a public figure. People talk. They see you at Willem's ceremony, practically caressing his wife's face, and they're like, what's up with that? You can't just hide behind friendship and expect no one to question it." He leaned forward now, mirroring Pascal's posture, his tone sharpening. "And this anxiety thing, you've been milking it for years. Is it real, or is it just a convenient excuse to do whatever you want?" The accusation landed like a slap, the studio falling into a stunned silence. Even the band seemed to hold its breath, the drummer's sticks frozen mid-air. Sunny Hostin gasped audibly, her hand flying to her mouth. "Stephen, that's enough!" she snapped, her voice trembling with indignation. The comedian on the panel, who had been silent until now, let out a nervous laugh and muttered, "Yikes, this is getting intense." Behind the scenes, the control booth was in chaos. Producers shouted into their headsets, one yelling, "Cut to commercial! Now!" while another countered, "No, let it play, this is gold." The floor manager paced frantically, his clipboard clutched like a lifeline, as the cameras zoomed in on Pascal's face. His expression was unreadable for a moment, his dark eyes fixed on Colbert, but the slight tremor in his jaw betrayed the storm brewing beneath his calm exterior. Pascal took a slow, deliberate breath, his hands unclenching as he sat back in his chair. When he spoke, his voice was steady, but there was a raw edge to it, a vulnerability that made the audience lean forward. "You know, Stephen, I've spent my whole career trying to be real with people," he said. "I talk about my anxiety because it's part of who I am. It's not an excuse, it's a truth. And yeah, I'm physical. I hug, I touch, I connect. That's how I show love, how I stay human in this crazy industry. But you?" He paused, his gaze piercing. "You take that truth and twist it into something dirty for a soundbite. You're not calling me out, you're bullying me. And I'm done letting you." The audience roared, a mix of cheers and gasps, some standing to applaud, others whispering in shock. A young woman in the front row wiped away a tear, her phone shaking in her hand as she recorded. Colbert blinked, caught off guard by the intensity of Pascal's response. For a split second, his polished facade cracked, his mouth opening and closing as he searched for a comeback. The cameras caught every micro-expression, the flicker of uncertainty, the tightening of his lips. But he recovered quickly, leaning back with a forced laugh. "Bullying? Oh, come on, Pedro, it's just a talk show. We're having fun here." He spread his arms wide, appealing to the audience, but the laughter was thin, the crowd's energy shifting toward Pascal. The stage lights seemed to dim slightly, or perhaps it was the weight of the moment pressing down on the room. Sunny Hostin shook her head, muttering something inaudible, while the comedian sank lower in his seat, clearly regretting his decision to appear tonight. Pascal didn't smile. He stood slowly, his movements deliberate, the sound of his chair scraping against the floor cutting through the murmurs of the audience. The cameras followed him, their lenses glinting like predators sensing blood. "Fun?" he repeated, his voice soft but laced with steel. "You call this fun? Dragging my name, my friends, my struggles through the mud for a few clicks? I came here to talk about a movie, about art, about something that matters. But you don't care about that, do you? You just want a moment that'll trend on X." He paused, his eyes sweeping the audience, connecting with them in a way that made the room feel smaller, more intimate. "I'm not here for your circus, Stephen. I'm here for the people who believe in me, who know who I am. And I'm not letting you rewrite that story." The studio erupted into chaos. Applause, shouts, and a few boos clashed like waves crashing against the shore. A producer in the control booth threw her headset down, yelling, "This is going viral, whether we like it or not!" The floor manager signaled frantically for a commercial break, but Pascal wasn't done. He took a step toward the edge of the stage, his posture radiating a quiet dignity that silenced the room. The cameras zoomed in, capturing the fire in his eyes, the set of his jaw, the way his hands trembled slightly, not with fear, but with the weight of standing his ground. What he said next would become the stuff of legend, a moment that would be replayed, dissected, and debated across the internet. But that's a story for the final chapter.